Some explorers risked everything to meet people the rest of the world has never seen. Some have made peaceful contact, others have disregarded peace entirely, and then there are the cases of explorers who never made it out alive. These are real people who visited uncontacted tribes. Sidney Possuelo is considered the leading authority on Brazil's remaining isolated indigenous peoples. Born in 1940, he got his start working in the Xingu River area with the Vilas Boas brothers, famous for their work in indigenous activism. He quickly learned the ropes of living and working alongside indigenous people. In the late 80s, he got caught up in a mess with the Arara tribe, who were clashing with construction crews on the Trans-Amazonian Highway. He saw up close that forcing tribes into contact or trying to assimilate them was just a terrible idea. That's when he pushed FUNAI, or the National Indian Foundation, to do something different. Along with a few allies, he helped set up the Department of Indigenous in Isolation in 1987 and became its first director. Under him, the amount of protected indigenous land in Brazil basically doubled in 2 years. He led crazy expeditions deep into the Amazon, making contact with isolated tribes without putting them in danger. He even managed to patch things up with the Corubo after they killed one of his close friends. Even after getting kicked out as director in 2006 for calling out FUNAI leadership, he didn't stop. He's still out there fighting for tribes through his organization, making sure the most vulnerable people in the Amazon, who want nothing to do with the outside world, have someone watching their back. Madhumala Chattopadhyay made history in 1991 as the first woman to actually make peaceful contact with the Sentinelese, one of the most isolated tribes in the world. She was part of an Indian government team sent to figure out a way to approach them without causing trouble. Since past attempts hadn't gone so smoothly, Madhumala didn't push anything. She took her time. She stayed respectful and made it clear she wasn't there to harm anyone. When the team landed, they hung back at first, just watching, letting things happen naturally. Eventually, she was able to give the tribe some small gifts, like coconuts. It wasn't instant friendship or anything, but there was a moment of understanding, proof that contact didn't have to turn violent. The government didn't want to push it. They knew more attempts could easily go wrong, so they kept things hands off. But not everyone who's made contact has tried to help, especially back in the day. Maurice Vidal Portman may be one of the biggest reasons the Sentinelese tribe is so aggressive toward outsiders to this day. This guy was disgusting. Portman showed up in the Andaman Islands in 1879 when he was just 19. He was a British naval officer tasked with overseeing the indigenous tribes at Port Blair, and he ended up staying for over 20 years, completely fixated on documenting them. The worst thing he did was probably his trip to North Sentinel Island. When the Sentinelese ran away from his group, Portman decided to kidnap 6 of them, 2 adults and 4 kids. He dragged them back to Port Blair, where both adults quickly died from illness. He sent the children back with some gifts, but they'd already been exposed to diseases. A lot of people think this is why the Sentinelese still attack anyone who tries to visit their island. Portman was a weirdo who spent his time taking lots of photos and obsessively measuring the male tribesmen's nether bits, and he helped spread stuff like smallpox through their communities. José Carlos Meirelles is basically a legend when it comes to protecting uncontacted tribes in Brazil. He grew up in a family of explorers and cattle herders and spent his childhood in a small town called Santa Rita de Passa Quatro. Early on, he ditched engineering studies and dove into indigenous work. A short course on indigenous peoples sent him to Maranhão, where he worked with the Urubu Kapur and the Awa, the first group to have contact with outsiders. In 1970, he officially joined FUNAI. He spent 10 years living among the Mancaniri and Jamanawa, learning their ways and figuring out how to protect them from outside threats. His work has been dangerous. He survived an arrow to the face in 2004, and back in the 80s, his group was attacked by an isolated tribe. He ended up killing one of them to save his father-in-law, something he calls one of the worst traumas of his life. Go figure. Vicente Cañas was a Spanish Jesuit missionary who basically became a part of the, just let me try to pronounce this right, Nawe tribe. He first made peaceful contact with them in 1974 and ended up living with the tribe for over 10 years. He learned their ways, he helped them with medical supplies, helped the population bounce back from just 97 people to over 430. He became part of their lives, fighting to help them get the land they needed to survive, especially a key fishing area called Rio Preto. Cañas was constantly getting threatened by cattle ranchers and landowners though, but he managed to push the government to officially recognize the land for the tribe. But decades later though, the land hasn't been fully protected. Sadly, in 1987 as well, the threats did turn deadly. A group of ranchers broke into his home near the tribe and ended his life. The so-called investigation was a mess. None of the initial suspects were charged. It took nearly 20 years before a trial even happened. By then, only one man could actually stand trial. Ronaldo Antonio Osmar was finally sentenced to 14 years in prison, more than a decade after he'd been acquitted the first time. Richard Mason was a British explorer who ended up becoming the last known Brit killed by an uncontacted tribe. Born in 1935 in Sussex, he went to Oxford to study medicine, but got hooked on exploration through the Royal Geographical Society. In 1958, he and a friend drove 6,000 miles across South America in a Jeep, making a route from Brazil to Peru that no Westerners had done before. By 1961, Mason was planning something even bigger, mapping the Ariri River in central Brazil, thought to be the longest unexplored river at the time. It took two fellow Oxford grads and an 11-man team, including porters and a Brazilian survey crew. They flew into a tiny airstrip in the middle of the Amazon and hacked through thick jungle for weeks with machetes. After building canoes and trying to locate the river, they realized that they were actually 7 miles off course. Supplies were running low, so his teammate went to get more help. On September 3rd, Mason was heading back from camp with a few supplies when an uncontacted indigenous hunting party ambushed him. He was hit by 8 bamboo poison arrows and smashed with clubs. Mason was buried in Rio on September 17th in 1961. Triloknath Pandit is an Indian anthropologist who became the first professional outsider to make peaceful contact with the Sentinelese. Born in 1935, his dad was a university professor. He studied science in Kashmir and then did a master's in anthropology at Delhi University, which set him up for a very unusual career. In 1967, Pandit was sent to North Sentinel Island by the governor of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. At first, the Sentinelese were hostile, hiding in the jungle and shooting arrows at him and his team. Pandit didn't give up though. For the next 24 years, he and his crew kept trying, leaving gifts, slowly building trust. All that patience paid off on January 4th, 1991, when they finally made friendly contact. Pandit spent much of his career as the head of the Andaman and Nicobar Regional Center of the Anthropological Survey of India, focusing on understanding and protecting these isolated tribes. This is one of the last photos of Michael Rockefeller, son of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller. Back in 1961, he went to Dutch New Guinea, now part of Indonesia, to study the Asmat people. While exploring the coast, his boat flipped over. He and a guy named Rene Wassing tried to swim about 12 miles to shore. Wassing got too tired and had to stop, but Michael kept going alone, and he was never seen again. One theory is that the Asmat tribe in the photo might have killed and eaten him. It wasn't unheard of for stuff like that to happen in parts of the area back then, but there's not a ton of proof for that, or really any. He could have also been eaten by sharks or just drowned. We'll never really know for sure. In 2006, a group of fishermen accidentally got way too close to North Sentinel Island. They were from a nearby island and had been fishing when their boat drifted near the shore. The Sentinelese didn't take kindly to the intruders. Arrows rained down. Tragically, all 3 fishermen were killed. The Indian government had spent years trying to respect the tribe's isolation, so they had to step in. Sending a team to recover the bodies was pretty tense. Everyone had to stay far enough away to avoid making the tribe even angrier. Some argued the deaths could have been prevented if the law banning contact with the island had been enforced better. The Sentinelese, again, remain one of the most protected and unreachable tribes in the world. With all that said, I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.